Good. You must now be able to see my slides.
Yes.
Great to see you all again. My name is Jaco Quist, who doesn't know it yet for the new people. I'm with Delft University of Technology in the Netherlands, but that's not what I would like to talk about, because I would tell more about past work and current plans on the working group SCP in cities. I do that also on behalf of Philip, who is Philip Grat, who is a co-chair also of this group. Actually, he wanted to reduce that, but there was also, well, that emerged some kind of a gap. And I also would like to say that this is also because of, on behalf of all members, including Patrick Schröder, who used to be to co-lead this group. So having said that, I'll just move on quickly. And I would like to say that this work originally was called Urban Provisioning, Inequality and Well-being, which actually emphasized more the justice and the well-being side. But after some discussions, we decided to make it a bit sharp, a bit more focused in order for the communication. But those terms that are being mentioned here are still important to the working group. And say the images shows on the one hand, like the flow diagram or the construction of a sustainable neighborhood constructed in Stockholm. But that's not the only way that you can look at cities or parts of cities. You can also look at more from a transition town or a social perspective. But it already shows that everything that we do here, it's very inter and transdisciplinary, like in the other working groups. Good. Just would like to mention, give you an overview of all the people that are currently active or have been active and have contributed to previous discussions and outputs. Just for your information. And I just would like to say that we meet virtually online every few months on average. And as you will all be familiar with now, this is a typical picture how that can look like on your screen. So what are then some key points in this working group? And that include that cities are hotspots of environmental impact. There is a huge issue of the imported emissions. If anything is done by cities or at a level of cities, it's focused on the locally produced emissions. So they are missing quite a lot. But we also see in cities that they provide opportunities, interesting examples, alternative consumption niches and local production. And there's one of the challenges, how can you scale it up? How can you mainstream or diffuse that? Of course, there are differences in what are the issues in the north and in southern cities. And say, if you want to work on SCP, we should not only take the perspective of nowadays, but also how that, what are the future challenges. And of course, I do not need to mention that a major topic of concern of in focus is what to handle, how to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, addressing issues, but also how to respond that. Good. That says something about some main starting points, discussion points. What have we been doing over the last few years? We had some scoping document report or generated, produced, that has eventually led to a paper in a Journal of Cleaner Production. And that says that summarizes many of the things that I've just mentioned. We also used the working group to produce proposals that sometimes came quite far, but still get problems on really getting approved, which is still a pity because there were really some novelty in that. And we also contributed to the Belmont proposal, and we organized a few times conference sessions on the CAN and in particular on the urban working group within that. Good. I think I should not say too much on this one. I better just move on and say the framework that we eventually developed to work on SCP in cities in a transdisciplinary, future-oriented way, giving both attention to current and future issues as emerging opportunities, as how you can develop overarching visions and policies for that. And that's say the core of the key, when in a nutshell, what we argue in our paper. We also occasionally organize like an internal webinar where we invite an external presenter, and the last one was Valerie Breccia. I hope I pronounced it well, but she reported on part of a book on post-corona lifestyles and how that relates to sustainable cities, and that already reflects the relevance of that topic. Good, just going on. So we had recently, about the last few months, a restarting discussion on new activities. We had finished a few ones, and then there's always a chance what to do next. And this just gives some ideas that we have been discussing about. So how to compare broad and narrow approaches to sustainability and SCP in cities, and how does that work out in practice? What are really good cases and examples of SCP in cities? So can we turn what we have done so far into a research agenda, or articulate that better? It's also been discussed that it would be interesting to reach out to other working groups. For instance, say if we talk about SCP in cities, how would that relate to the emerging discussions on circular cities? So that would allow for interesting exchange with the circular economy group. There is also still idea about working on future plans, future visions for SCP in cities. And we occasionally talk about reaching out to key stakeholders. There are some occasional contacts with C40 projects initiated or invited by SCORI members. So these are the kind of things that we have been talking about in the last few months. And say we have decided that we had to set some priorities there. So it all depends on people that have time and willing to do that. And we have decided to look at how SCP is included in city plans, and how we distinguish between this climate action, more short-term oriented, versus the long-term and third-term more sustainability oriented. And we're currently working on the case study protocol. We plan to take on our own city of cities that we know well. We have now cities in 4 continents, and we are now working on the protocol, and we want to conduct or execute that later this year, and so that we get results and can turn that into output and in examples, maybe even policy briefs. And I would like to emphasize here that this is not only open for the current working group members, there are also a few new ones already, but everyone that's in the can and has an interest in joining this, say, sub-project or project within this working group is very welcome to join that. And for that, we're currently doing monthly update meetings just to keep some that. Just moving on, say in the last meeting which we had very recently, we also talked about what to bring to this meeting. That's in the first place the invitation to join the comparing cities activity. But we would also like to say is that we are in a need of we would like to have more interaction, exchange with others in the can, but also with others working on SCP outside the can. And our recommendation or our suggestion for the entire can is to work towards a larger conference in collaboration with other organizations on SCP. There is the suggestion of circular cities versus SCP in cities, sustainable cities. And to this we can add, we can also think that's more strategically, that might be more for next week at the steering committee, can we think of increasing our impact and influence in other circles, for instance, towards organizations that are shaping their research agendas right now. And within our group, there's also awareness about differences between South and North, but also that we could exchange more and more, learn from each other on that. That's about it, what I wanted to say, and that's where I would like to leave it for now. Thanking everyone that has contributed so far, and looking forward to any suggestions, comments, or questions.
Thank you very much, Jaco.